My husband's affair nearly destroyed me until a stranger messaged me on Facebook. You deserve to know the truth. Attached were screenshots, hotel receipts, and a list of women he had cheated with over the years. My blood ran cold. That night, I sent him a text with the same message, you deserve to know the truth. When he opened the link, his own secrets were staring back at him. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through Facebook, when my phone buzzed. New message request. I almost ignored it. Probably spam. But something made me open it. The message was short. You deserve to know the truth. Attached were screenshots, hotel receipts, messages, and a list of names. My stomach twisted. I clicked on the first screenshot. It was a text conversation. My husband's name at the top. The messages were disgusting. Explicit. Calling another woman baby. Making plans for a weekend getaway. I opened another screenshot. Another woman. And another. Then I saw the list. 9 names. Some I didn't recognize. Some I did. One was our realtor. One was his coworker. One was my friend. I felt like I was falling, like my entire world had just split in two. For the first few minutes, I couldn't think. My body reacted before my brain did. My hands started shaking. My throat closed up. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Then I sat on the cold tile floor and stared at the phone, willing the words to change, to mean something else. But they didn't. Mark had cheated on me. Not once. Not twice. 9 women. And who knows if that was the real number. I don't know how long I sat there. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. But eventually, I got up. I washed my face. Took deep breaths. And then, for the first time in my life, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started lying. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I did what I always did. I cooked dinner. Kissed him goodnight. Smiled when he talked about his long day at work. I waited. Because I knew if I exploded now, he'd have time to cover his tracks. So I played dumb. And in the meantime, I started digging. I went through our shared bank account. There it was, charges from hotels, restaurants I had never been to, plane tickets for flights I never took. I checked our phone records. Late-night calls. Texts to unknown numbers. I looked at his emails. His work travel wasn't work travel. I even checked our security cameras. Half the time he claimed to be working late, he was never at the office. And then, I did something I should have done a long time ago. I messaged her back. Her name was Natalie. We met at a cafe the next morning. She was younger than me. Pretty. But not in a flashy way. She looked nervous. I'm sorry, she said the second she saw me. I didn't say anything. Just waited. She swallowed hard. I didn't know he was married at first. I let out a slow breath. How long? Over a year. That hit me like a punch to the chest. He told me he was divorced, she continued. He was so convincing. He even showed me an apartment. Said it was his, but I guess now I know it was probably some Airbnb. My hands clenched under the table. But then I found out. A few weeks ago. And when I did, I started looking. I found other women. Some were still with him. Some were already done. But all of them thought they were the only one. She slid her phone across the table. More messages. More proof. This was last week, she whispered. The texts were from Mark. Telling her he loved her. Asking if she wanted to go to Miami for the weekend. I felt numb. The worst part? He had kissed me goodbye that same morning. Told me he loved me. And then he had sent her this. When I got home, I went straight to our bedroom. Sat on the bed. Stared at the framed wedding photo on the nightstand. For 10 years, I believed in this man. For 10 years, I thought we had a good marriage. For 10 years, he was lying to my face. And the worst part? He wasn't even sorry. Because he didn't know I knew. That night, as we sat on the couch watching TV, I looked at him and felt nothing. Not love. Not hate. Just nothing. And that's when I knew. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to end him. And he'd never see it coming. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to Mark's steady breathing beside me. I wondered how many times he had fallen asleep next to me after being with one of them. I wondered if he had ever thought about how much it would destroy me if I found out. Probably not. Men like Mark never think they'll get caught. They think they're smarter than the women who love them. They think they can juggle 2, 3, 4 lives and never slip up. But Mark had slipped up. He had underestimated the wrong woman. I started small. The next day, I accidentally mentioned his phone. "You've been on it a lot lately," I said casually over breakfast. He barely looked up. "Work's been crazy." A test. And he failed it. Lying came so easy to him. I nodded like I believed him. I figured. "You've been gone so much." Now he looked up. Just for a second. A flicker of panic. I smiled. And he relaxed. I almost laughed. He really thought I was that clueless. I spent the next week gathering more evidence. I dug through emails, bank statements, even his GPS history. Turns out, he wasn't just cheating. He was funding his affairs with our joint account. Our money. Hotel rooms. Expensive dinners. Gifts. He was taking them on the kind of dates he used to take me on. And I let it build, that quiet rage sitting in my chest like a loaded gun. But I still needed one more thing. So I followed him. I told him I had dinner plans with a friend. I even got dressed up to sell the lie. Kissed him on the cheek on my way out. Then I sat in my car down the street and waited. He left 20 minutes later. I tailed him, keeping my distance, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. He pulled into a hotel parking lot. Marriott on Michigan Avenue. And she was waiting for him. Not Natalie. A new woman. Blonde. Younger than me. Wearing a red dress that barely covered anything. I took pictures. Video. Every step they took. Him holding her waist. Whispering something in her ear. The way she laughed, tilting her head up like she thought he was the best thing in the world. And I thought, I used to be her. I didn't go home that night. I needed time to think. So I checked into a hotel. Sat on the bed and stared at my phone, scrolling through all the proof I had gathered. And then I did something Mark would never expect. I called his boss. "Hi, Mr. Calloway, this is Emma. Mark's wife. Do you have a minute?" A pause. "Of course. Everything okay?" "Oh, I was just wondering, do you normally book travel accommodations for employee spouses?" He hesitated. "No, we don't." "Why?" I smiled. That was all I needed. "Just curious," I said sweetly. "Thank you for your time." I hung up before he could ask more questions. Then I sent him an email. With every receipt attached. Every fraudulent expense. Every lie. And I CC'd HR. By the next afternoon, Mark was home early. Furious. "Are you insane?" he snapped the second I walked in. "You called my job?" I set my purse down calmly. "They called me, actually. Said you were being investigated for misusing company funds." His face drained of color. "Emma," I held up my hand. "Save it." "I know, Mark. I know about all of them." Silence. He opened his mouth. "Shut it again." "Good. Let him choke on it." "I don't know what you think you know," I laughed. Then I grabbed my phone and pulled up the pictures. The texts. The video of him with the blonde in the red dress just last night. His mouth actually fell open. Like he couldn't believe I had caught him. You spied on me?" he finally croaked. "Oh, the audacity. You lied to me," I shot back. 4 years. His jaw tightened. He was scrambling now, trying to figure out which excuse to reach for. But I wasn't interested in hearing them. So I walked right past him, grabbed my suitcase from the closet, and started packing. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Not far," I said. "Not yet." I zipped up the suitcase. Met his eyes. "And don't bother calling your boss. He's not going to save you. You're done, Mark." And then I walked out. And the game really began. I wasn't gone for long. I wanted him to stew in it. Let his mind race. Let him wonder what my next move was. When I returned home 3 days later, he looked like he hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled. I could practically smell the panic on him. "Emma," he started the second I walked in, "we need to talk." I ignored him and walked straight to the bedroom, tossing my suitcase onto the bed. Emma, he said again, following me. I know you're mad, I let out a sharp laugh. Mad? Oh, Mark, I passed mad 2 nights ago when I watched you grope some blonde outside a Marriott. I'm somewhere way past that. He swallowed hard. Good. Listen, I was an idiot, okay? I made mistakes. I turned to him slowly. Mistakes? He nodded quickly, like if he agreed with me, I'd soften. I want to fix this, he said. I don't want to lose you. I tilted my head. Oh? So why did you book another hotel for tonight? His entire face dropped. Bullseye. How did you? I held up my phone. Your credit card alerts come straight to my email. Did you really think I wouldn't see the $289 charge for the Langham? Silence. I took a step closer. Tell me, Mark, who were you meeting there? Natalie? The blonde from the Marriott? Or is this another new woman? His mouth opened. Then closed. He had nothing. I smirked. That's what I thought. I let the silence stretch. Let him squirm. Then I hit him with it. Why? I asked. Why did you do it? He hesitated. Like maybe he was about to make something up. I shook my head. Don't lie. If you want any chance of keeping your job, your money, your reputation, you better start telling the truth. I expected some rehearsed excuse. I was prepared for it. But what he said? I wasn't ready for that. I liked feeling wanted, he muttered. My stomach twisted. What? He ran a hand over his face. I don't know, Emma. It wasn't about you. It was about me. It was easy. These women, they didn't expect anything from me. They didn't nag me. They didn't talk about bills or responsibilities. They just wanted me. For a second, I just stared at him. Then I burst out laughing. Not because it was funny. Because it was the weakest, most pathetic excuse I had ever heard. So what? I scoffed. You got tired of being a husband, so you went and played boyfriend to a bunch of women who didn't know the real you? Is that it? He sighed. I never wanted to hurt you. I took a slow step forward. That's where you're wrong, I whispered. Because you wanted everything. The wife, the house, the stability, but you also wanted the thrill. You wanted to have it all. His silence was my confirmation. And suddenly, something clicked. I didn't love this man anymore. I loved the version of him I thought existed. The one I had built up in my head. But this man standing in front of me? He was a stranger. I turned around, grabbed my suitcase, and started walking out. Wait, Mark said, voice rising. Where are you going now? I smirked. To finish what I started. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at the screen. A text from his sister. I grinned. Perfect timing. See, I had been busy the last 3 days. I had messaged every woman on the list. Told them the truth. Some had blocked me. Some had apologized. And some? Some had their own revenge plans. Mark's sister had been particularly furious. She'll never believe you, he scoffed when I mentioned her. I smirked. Oh, she already does. She was the first person I sent the screenshots to. His face went pale. That's when his phone buzzed again. And then my favorite part, the landline rang. He hesitated before answering. Hello? I didn't need to hear the other side to know who it was. His boss. I turned, walking out the front door. And just before it shut behind me, I heard it. A single, perfect sentence. Mark, we need to talk about your position at this company. I smiled. Because this? This was just the beginning. I didn't go far. I didn't need to. Mark was unraveling. I wanted to watch. I sat in my car across the street, watching the house I had spent a decade making into a home. Lights flickered on and off as Mark paced from room to room. He was making calls. His body language told me everything. First, he was angry. Throwing his hands in the air. Probably calling his sister, maybe his boss. Trying to spin a story. Then, he was desperate. He collapsed onto the couch, rubbing his face. He was realizing, really realizing, what he had done. Then his phone rang again. And this time, he froze. Because I was calling. I watched as he hesitated, then finally answered. Emma, he said, out of breath like he had just run a mile. Mark, I said calmly. A beat of silence. What do you want? His voice was hoarse. I smiled. You know what I want. He exhaled sharply. Emma, listen, meet me, I said. The diner on Clark Street. In an hour. Another silence. You don't have a choice, I added. You owe me that much. And then I hung up. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. The smell of coffee and fried food hung in the air. Mark was already there, sitting in the farthest booth. He looked like hell. Dark circles under his eyes. Shirt wrinkled. Hair a mess. A man who had been knocked off his throne and hadn't figured out how to stand back up. I slid into the seat across from him. Emma, he started. I held up a hand. No lies. No excuses. He swallowed. I took my time. Poured sugar into my coffee. Stirred it. Let the silence stretch. Then, I leaned in. Did you love any of them? His jaw tightened. Tell me the truth, I pressed. For once. His fingers tapped against the table. No, he finally admitted. It wasn't about love. Then what was it about? He exhaled. I already told you. It was about me. I nodded. That's the first honest thing you've said all night. I let that sink in. Let him hear himself. You didn't just cheat on me, I continued. You made me feel crazy. Every time I questioned you, every time I said something felt off, you made me doubt myself. You stole years from me, Mark. His head dropped. I know. But I wasn't done. You lied to my face every single day. And for what? Some thrill? The ego boost of having a bunch of women falling over you? He didn't answer. You destroyed us, I whispered. For nothing. Mark's hands clenched into fists. I never meant to hurt you. I laughed. But you did. Over and over again. And you never stopped. You just got better at hiding it. His eyes were glassy now. I wasn't sure if they were filled with guilt or just self-pity. But it didn't matter. You ruined your own life, I said, standing up. Now you get to live with it. He looked up at me. Emma, I dropped an envelope on the table. Divorce papers. Sign them, I said. And don't try to fight it, because you won't win. Mark opened his mouth. Then closed it. He knew. He had already lost. I grabbed my coat, turned, and walked out. I didn't look back. Mark didn't fight the divorce. His job let him go within a week. The women? Some of them wanted revenge too. Natalie put him on blast all over social media. The blonde? Turned out she wasn't single. Her boyfriend sent Mark a not-so-friendly message that involved breaking his nose. His family was furious. His mother cried. His sister called him every name in the book. And me? I walked away. I took half of everything. Sold the house. Packed my things. And started over. The first morning in my new apartment, I stood by the window, drinking coffee. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel like I had to check his phone. Or wonder where he was. I was free. I set my mug down, grabbed my phone, and opened a new message. To Mark. I typed 2 words. You deserve this. Then I deleted his number. And walked into my brand new life.